A good Erev Shabbos to everybody. We're continuing on in our quest to make it through Elohein Aloikin and Malchus. Okay, so when the Mishnah mentioned that if you eat Ma'aser Sheni that wasn't Poida or Hegdish wasn't Poida, so you get Malchus, and we're discussing that right now. We're on Tes Zion Amid Beis, Tes Zion Amid Beis, about 10 lines up by the two dots. Achel Tevel Ma'aser Sheni, Amarav. Achel Tevel Shel Ma'aser Ani. If you eat Tevel Ma'aser Ani like it. So what's the case? A person went ahead and you're supposed to go ahead and be mafresh trumas and ma'isa. So the first, as we said again, we go over this all the time, is because people forget it all the time. So the first thing you separate is truma gedayla, goes to the kayin. The next thing you separate is ma'aser rishon, that goes to the Levi. From the ma'aser rishon, the Levi separates trumas and ma'isa. In the first, second, third, fourth, fifth year in a Shemitah cycle, you go ahead and you separate Ma'aser Sheni, you go to Yerushalayim. In the third year and the sixth year, in lieu of Ma'aser Sheni, you have Ma'aser Ani. So Tevel, we know, it could be Misa B'dei Shemayim, because we have Truma mixed in there. What about Ma'aser Ani? So let's say you separated everything, and it's the third and the sixth year, so you took off the Truma Gedoyla, you took off the Ma'aser Rishon, and you didn't separate the Ma'aser Ani. Now, why would you think Ma'aser Ani is different? So Rashi tells us. Let's see, Rashi, what's the Shaila predicated upon? Tevel Shel Ma'aser Ani, says Rashi, Shehufreshu Kol Ma'asroisav, Chutz Mizeh, you separated all, and you ate it, loika. V'yafagav the Ma'aser Ani ein bo kedusha, even though Ma'aser Ani has no kedusha, Shari Luzarim Nechal, it's eaten by Zorim, and the key being Ubechol Makom, because Ma'aser Sheni is also eaten b'chol Zorim, but it's not eaten b'chol Makom, it's Dafka Yerushalayim. Rashi is Meduya Kimin Chaimer, guys. You saw what Rashi just did, right? It's not. It doesn't have kedusha. It doesn't have any kedusha, as opposed to Ma'aser Sheni, as according to Reb Meir, has kedusha. It's Mammon Gavoa. In addition, Ma'aser Sheni is eaten Yerushalayim, but Ma'aser Ani is not. So everyone holds its Mammon Bailam, and therefore I feel hachi tavel. So you might think that what? If you eat it, it's gezela, but maybe it's not. Maybe you won't get. Maybe you will not get malchus. So on that says Rav, if you eat tevel shel ma'aser rishon ani like it, keman, like who? Ki tana, like the following tana, the Tanya. Rabbi Yossi says Rabbi Yossi, Yachal I might think, lo yechayiv el al tevel shlei hormi menu kolika. I might think that what? When are you chayiv? On Tevel that you didn't go ahead and separate any meiser at all. You didn't separate anything at all. If you separated Truma Gedoyla and gave it to the Kayin, or Meiser Rishon, you separated Meiser Rishon of Meiser Sheni. Afila Meiser Ani. All of these mean Nayin. How do you know that Yechayiv Tamad Loimar L'Sucha Lechol B'Shorecha? You're not able to go ahead and eat it. Ma'aser the gun chatirosh v'tzerecha ulano oimer b'yachlu b'sharecha v'saveyu, and you'll eat it in your gates v'saveyu. Ma'alahal and Ma'aser Ani, just like over there, it's speaking about Ma'aser Ani, and it says b'sharecha. Avkan, where it says leisucha lecha b'sharecha, it's speaking about Ma'aser Ani, that you're not able to eat. You're not able to eat Ma'aser Ani. It says Rashi Ma'alahal Ma'aser Ani dichsiv lager la'yasam u'almona u'binyonei deshona hashlishis. It's speaking in the Yoni Shana Ashlishis, which is Ma'aser Ani. Apisharecha Makan Yishlomu Mimeno Ma'aser Ani. V'achi Kamar Leisucha Lechol Tevel Me'oisha Ma'aser B'Seichai Shekasa B'Sharecha. As long as is written, as long as it contains, this Tevel contains the Ma'aser that we refer to as B'Sharecha, which means Ma'aser Ani. Where does she get it right here from? Ma'aser Ani, as long as it means Ma'aser Ani, therefore what? You would get malchus. Therefore, you're getting malchus. Okay. New din. The Amr Rabbi Yosef Kit Hanoi. So this shaila about Ma'aser Ani having that you'll get malchus for it, l'chayr depends upon machlokas Tanoim. Okay, let's see Rashi before we see the Gemara. Let's see Rashi. It's Yisodis the Rashi. It says Rashi, "Ain't tzorich likor es Hashem." If you have Ma'aser Ani, Again, you don't have to call the name. Meaning, in the Tevel state, you don't have to say the north part is Maisa Ani. You don't have to say anything. So that's according to one opinion. Says Rashi. The Aminon in Saita Daf Memches, the Yochanan Kohen Gadol Sholach Bechol Gavul Yisrael, V'roa Samei Oretz Chashudim Ala Maisris. That they were choshit for not for Maisa Rishon and Or they were choshit. Chutz mi Truma Gedoyla, with the exception of Truma Gedoyla, because they were worried about Misa B'dei Shemayim. Amalan mi Yisrael, Banai, Keshem Shat Truma B'Misa, just like if you eat Truma, it's B'Misa B'dei Shemayim, Kacha Tevel B'Misa. So too Tevel is Misa. Amad v'tikin alokeach mamoretz. This is the takana of Demai. So Rabbi Yochanan went and said, anyone who purchases tfuah from an amoretz, yafish kol ha'maisris. He has to take off all the maisris. Uma'atman la'atzma, he can keep it for himself. V'yoichel. Maiser rishon is able to keep, shari mutl zarim. Maiser sheni oichel b'Yushalayim. The Maiser sheni he would eat in Yushalayim. V'im shnas Maiser anihi, and if it's the third or sixth year, mechlku Rebbe Eliezer v'chachamim. This is the machlokes between the Eliezer and the chachamim. Do you have to go ahead and set, is Kriyas Hashem enough? You don't have, again, and the Mai, you don't have to separate. Even to go as far as stating that without separating physically, just verbally separating, the the Maisa Ani of this Kri should be in the north, or the south. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer is viewing Maisa Ani as so much yours, so of the Mai, so much so you don't even have to separate it. And now that he's going to be l'chayra, the Tana of this Brisa, the Brisa that says he's not going to be the Tana of the Brisa, because the Tana of Brisa says you get Malchus. Obviously, if he holds that watch, you don't even have to separate it. It's not so shver. Says the Gemara. So let's say this din of Rav that you would get Malchus for eating tevel of Maisa Ani is a machlokes Tanoim. Right. Amar Rav Yosef Ketanoi. Rabbi Lezer Oime ain't tzarich likros es Hashem al Maisa Ani shel demai. If it's demai, and Rashi just told us what demai is, and it's a suffix whether they would mafresh shumas and Maisa. But kind Maisa Ani, you don't medafne zogin. You don't have to say anything. Just go ahead and separate the Maisa Rishon. And if it's a Maisa Maisa Ani, just leave it. The Chachamim Moimrim Amid Aleph, Kairas Hashem. You go ahead, and you go ahead and you're Kair with the shame. You taka say the Maisa Ani should be in the north or it should be in the south. Ve'ein et tzarich la'afresh, and you don't have to go ahead and want to be mafresh it. That's it. It's enough to be called a name. My love, the Svarsa Machlekes, whether you have to call the name or not. B'hokem Mifleki. Dimar Savar, the Chachamim that hold that you have to call the name Savri Vadai Tivloi. They say Vadai, when it's Vadai Maisa, it's Tevel. So when it's Suffix, since it's a Suffix, you'd have to call the shame. In other words, the parallel in the realm of Demai parallels the Chiev in the realm of Vadai. So obviously in the realm of Vadai, which is our discussion, guys, we're not discussing Demai. In our discussion, whether you receive Malchus for Tevel of Maisa Ani, obviously the Chachamim who hold by Demai, you have to call the shame, shows that it has a din of Tevel when it's Vadai, and therefore you'd have to separate it. And if you don't, you get Malchus. Umas Savar, guys, you hear what I'm telling you? The Machloikis, the Chacham is in Demai. We don't need it by Demai. We need it in the Vadai, which is saying we can reflect in what they hold in the Mai to go ahead and show what they hold by the Vadai. Correct? That's what we're saying right now. Good? So Memela, if you're holding by the case of Vadai, the case of Vadai, you have to call the shame, it must, in the case of the Mai, you have to call the shame, it must be Vadai that you have to separate it. And if you don't, you're going to get Malchus. Rabbi Avi, when you Zayin Amid Aleph the top. Okay? And Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion. Rabbi Eliezer says what? Where it's tevel vadai, you don't have to separate. And memela, it's not necessary to go ahead and create shame. So memela, Rav's din is like the chachamim. Rav who said you get malchus holds like the chachamim. Guys, you good? Enough bobbleheads over here. We're good. Okay, good. Now, Amalei Abaya. Ihachi, if you're telling me that the Svaras HaMachloikis is, guys, is what? By Vadai, yeah? Ademiflgi b'sveikai, why are they arguing by Demai? Liflik b'vadai. Let them argue by Vadai. In other words, why should we have to go ahead and say what they hold by Vadai reflects the din had by Demai? In other words, why do we say in Demai tells us what they're holding by Vadai? If that's what they hold, tell us the Machlokes Vadai itself. Don't tell us the Machlokes by Demai. Tell us by Vadai, you have to separate. You don't have to separate. Why do you tell me Kriyas Hashem over here? Ella, that must not be the Svaras HaMachlokes, and therefore Rav is not a Machlokes Tanoim. Again, Rav the Amoira does not want to come out of Keneged Rebbe Eliezer if possible. Ella the Kuli Alma Vadai Tovloi. Everyone would hold, guys. If it is Vadai, if it's Vadai not the Mai, if it's Vadai Tovloi, everyone would hold you get Malchus. Everyone, even Rebbe Eliezer would hold you get Malchus. You have to separate it. V'hacha by the Mai, what's the Svaras Machlokes? V'hacha by the Mai, v'hacha miflagi. Masa v'lei nechshdu amaretz al maisani shel the Mai. You know why you don't have to call this a shame? Because they took it off already. They took it off already. You don't have to call it right. Kivin de memainahu. Since it's theirs, afrushe mafresh, they'll separate it. V'rabbanan savri kivin de trichale milsa. Since it's a pain, loy mafresh. Okay, so let's go now. They don't separate Ma'aser Rishon, they have to give it to the Levi, right? They have to give it to the Levi. They don't separate Ma'aser Sheni because they have to schlep it to Yerushalayim. Oh, Ma'aser Ani, no sweat off my back, I'm keeping it anyway. That's the Machlokes. So the reason why by Demai you don't have to separate according to Rebbe Eliezer is because they separated it, they took it. We're not choished that they won't separate. No, it's a pain to separate, and therefore you have to call. But Einachinami. By Vadai, the halacha would be that you have to separate. And the Mela Rav, Rav could hold. I feel like Rebbe Eliezer, you would get Malchus. According to Rebbe Eliezer, you would get Malchus. So Geshmak, a little sugya. Okay. Now, the last din of the Mishnah, if we go back to Yud Gimel, no, it was Yud Gimel on the base. No. Why am I so far back? It's amazing. Yeah. It's Yud Gimel, Amid Aleph. Kama yoichel min hatevel yechayev. 5 lines up. How much will you eat betevel and be chayev? Reb Shimon oimer kol shehu bissel, no shear. The chachamim oimrim kezayis. The shear is the kezayis. Reb Shimon, you eat a little ant, yechayev. Because that's the way it was created. So to add 1 kernel of wheat also is kibriyasa. So therefore, you should get what? You should get kosher. Now, fellas, when it says we had in Gemara in Sukkah that shiurim, machna shiurim. And shiurim Allah Sinai is that you need a shear to get punished. That's Allah Sinai. You need a shear to get punished. This is machlokes. What is that shear? In other words, don't mix up. You say over here, what's the machlokes? It's Allah Sinai. No, the Allah Sinai is that what you need a shear to get punished. Here, what machlokes is what is the shear? Machlokes, what is the shear? Okay. So, Kami Yoichel min hatevel, Amar Bibi bar Abaye, Amar Shimon ben Lakish, Machlokes that the Chacham say Kazayas, and Chacham says Kol Shehu is Bechita, where you have the wheat intact. Aval Bekemach, once you grind it into flour, Divri Akol, everyone's of the opinion is Kazayas. Even Reb Shimon would be moeded to Kazayas. You don't have Kibriyasa, guys, right? If Rav Shimon's Svari is Kibriyasa, the way it was born, the way it came into existence, it's no longer in that state. Rav Yirmiyah Amar, Rav Shimon ben Lakish, K'machloikis bezu, k'machloikis bezu. So we have machloikis between Rav Bibi and Rav Yirmiyah as to what Reish Lakish said. Again, you have machloikis amaroyim in what an Amoira said. Rav Bibi said the machloikis is only by the existing wheat. But if it's what? If it's kemach, then even Rav Shimon would be moeded to gazayis. And Rav Yomi says no. Rav Yomi says even by Kemach, Rav Shimon would argue. Right. Kach madloikas bezu. Tanan, Amalei Rabbi Shimon, Iyat hamoideli ba'oichel nemala kol shu chayiv. Amalei meshu kibiyasa. Amalehem afkita achas kibiyasa. What's the diuk? Chita in kemach loy. Kasha on Rav Yirmiyah. You Rav Yirmiyah are learning that Rav Shimon would argue even when you transform it from a kernel into flour, you'd still get malchus, right? You say from over here, mashma, no. Chita in, from the Lashon of the Mishnah, mashma, an existing grain rather than a ground grain. Well, it says the Gemara, like, Lidevreim kamalahu. Rav Shimon is answering the Chachamim according to their words. Lididi, according to me, Rav Shimon, I feel kemach nami. Even kemach also be kolshu. Again, a kolshu. According to you, oidel amiyas, nonetheless be moided to me, the chita achas kibriyasa. That a chita achas is kibriyasa. No, according to your words that you answered me that an amola is kibriyasa, right? If you moided to me that a chita is kibriyasa. But in achinami, I hold kemach as well. Again, I hold the Torah is megala that you get punished for a share. It's kolshu. It's kolshu. The share of kazayas only exists for a carbon. It only exists for a carbon. But the share is kolshu. That's it. So why did I use lashon chita? I'm using your words, right? You answered me in the mullah, so I'm saying, so if you're in the mullah, so chita also. But in achinami, even kemach would be. Rabbanon, kriyas neshama chashuva, chita la chashuva. In other words, kriyasa doesn't mean the way it came into the world. Kriyasa means it has a life force. What's the svara, fellas, of kriyasa, a beria? It has a chashivas. We know when it comes to bittel that a beria is not batal. I feel the elephant batal. Chaticha sharui l'schabed, right, is like batal. Davar shebeminyan is like batal. The whole incident is in the chashivas, right? So a toita zach has no chashivas. It's the way Hashem created it. That's not what we meant. You mistakenly thought we meant that. What did we really mean? We meant what? That has a life force, right? Nabala has a life force. Chita doesn't have a life force. Tanya Kavose, the Rabbi Yirmiyah guys, that Rav Shimon would argue afila bekemach, right? Rav Shimon oimer kol shulam makis. To get makis is kol shuhu. Layom kazayas el inyan carbon. We said kazayas only inyan carbon. Again, there's a nice taisvis in daf. I don't know, daf hey or vav and sukkah daf aleph in the bottom there. Okay, anyway. We know there's a din of Bikurim. The first year you bring it up, right? You bring up Bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash. And it Shavuos time from the Zion Minim, you bring it up, you bring it into Yerushalayim. It doesn't, you could eat from it until it gets to Yerushalayim. Once it gets to Yerushalayim, you can't eat it. And when are you Mekayim the mitzvah? Mekayim the mitzvah by Hanacha, fellas. When you put it down in front of the Mizbeach in front of the Kohen. That's the mitzvah. In addition, you read the Parsha of Arami Ravi Ravi, up to a certain point. You read the Parsha of Arami Ravi Ravi for Chanukah, I think. And that's it. With this in mind, would you get malchus for eating it? Says the Gemara. You go ahead, and the kohen, guys, it's speaking about a kohen. You know why? Because a yid would get misa b'dei shemayim. Bikurim has a din of truma. It's called trumas yadcha. Bikurim has a din of truma. And just like truma is a din of misa b'dei shemayim, so to bikurim is misa b'shemayim. So if you're speaking about what like keach, right? Anyway, so it's speaking about a kohen, guys. It's meduyak, right? It's speaking about a kohen because a yid would be misa b'dei shemayim. Before you read the parsha of Arami David Avi, good. Kodesh Kadashim Chutz L'Kloyim. If you ate Kodesh Kadashim outside the Kloyim, now Kloyim is in the Zman of the Mishkan, where they didn't have walls, right? We have Chutz from the. So that's when Kloyim means the curtains. Rashi says Kodesh Kadashim Chutz L'Kloyim. Oishalch Kodeshim Kadashim Bizman Mishkan Chutz L'Kloyim. We're going to fire Sheikh and Musa. The Gemara explain where's the warning from, but you see that while it's speaking, Kloyim means Mishkan. That's why it's speaking about curtains. If you catch some kalim outside the walls of Yerushalayim, or Maisa Sheni outside the walls of Yerushalayim, of a Pesach, someone breaks the bone of a marrow bone on the car for the carbon Pesach. Hatar, that is a tar car. That's tar. It's not tamei. How is it like it? Again, the name of this parak is Eli and Aloikin. you're going to get Malkus. You're going to get Malkus for what? Eating Bikurim before Kriyas Hashem. If you're going to go, before you read, meaning Kriyas Hashem, before you read the Parsha of Rami David, you eat outside the Chayma when you should be eating it, you would get Malkus. And then, if you break the bone of a Korban Pesach, Aval Hamoisa B'Tahar, if you leave over B'Tahar, not Tamei, leave over B'Tahar, or V'Hashoiver B'Tamei, or you break a Korban Pesach that's Tamei, Ain't a like Arboim, you won't get Malkus Arboim. Okay, this sound familiar. Hanoitel Eim Al Abanim, if you took the baby, if you didn't send away the mother yet, so you mevatel the mitzvah of Shleach the Shalach Hasaim. If you don't like it, it's too late. There is no, it's not a lav aniktak. That's why the asay is stated before the lav. You should send it away. You didn't send it away. You over the lav. There's no nitak after that. We had this yesterday. But Chachamim Omer, no, Mishaleach ve'ena like it. It's still a lav anitak that the dinner shaluach is going side before and side afterwards. You're not chayiv. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Amar Rav Rav Chana Amar Yochanan. Zu divrei Akiva stimusa. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva stimusa. This din that bikurim is, that it's not bikurim chayiv before you eat it before the kohen eats it before you read the parsha, is the words of Rabbi Akiva. Let's see Rashi, guys. Zu divrei Rabbi Akiva. Maslisim diktani bikurim kriya ma'akva, that it's ma'akiv your achila. Again, that's the kohen's able to eat it at a certain point. When's the point where you're able to eat it? After the kriya of Aram Ravid. That's Rabbi Akiva. Shayirogel Rabbi listim devarov b'mishnah b'stam b'kamem makaimis. So Rashi is explaining what does it mean Rabbi Akiva stimusa, that Rabbi Akiva said it in, and Rabbi was accustomed that after hearing B'Shem Rabbi Akiva, he would go ahead and say it anonymously, that we should pass him like him. Even though we never find Rabbi Akiva saying it, Rabbi Yochanan had a Messiah that it was Rabbi Akiva. In other words, the Gemara is going to ask in a second, fellas. Just 1 second. Right now, Rabbi Yochanan is suggesting that this din of the Mishnah, that Kriya is Ma'akiv, is Rabbi Akiva stimusa, even though we don't have Rabbi Akiva saying it. This is important because the Gemara is going to say in a second, 1 second, why did you say it in the name of Rabbi Akiva? I have Rav Shimon saying it openly. You could have said like Rav Shimon openly rather than what Stam the Velterein. Okay, so this din of Bikurim that the Kriya is Ma'akiv, right? I would say is Rabbi Akiva stimusa. The Chachamim of the opinion, Bikurim hanochem akeves behen. Bikurim, the act of putting it down before the kohen is ma'akiv. Kriya ain't ma'akiv. If you don't say kriya, it still has the din of bikurim. The lame of Gemara, zu divrei Reb Shimon stimusa. In other words, why do you say it b'shem Rabbi Akiva stam, fellas? If I have Reb Shimon saying it openly, then you could say Rebbe was sussing the words of Reb Shimon. You're saying Rabbi Yochanan saying that what? That Rebbe decided to go ahead and quote anonymously Rabbi Akiva, where we don't have Rabbi Akiva saying it anywhere. Why don't we say Rebbe quoted Reb Shimon anonymously? Because we do have Reb Shimon saying it, as we see right now. Says the Gemara, Shimon Stimusa, which we're going to meet in a second. Says the Gemara, Kamash Malon, Rabbi Akiva Kreb Shimon Srirle. Rabbi Akiva agreed with his Talmud of Shimon Bar Yochai. He agreed with him that what? That Kriya is Ma'akiv, and not Anacha. My Rav Shimon, where do you see Rav Shimon saying it? Okay, so this is important. We're going to have the rest of the daf, guys, is basically be based upon this pasuk. Lo sucha lecho b'sharecha, you're not able to eat in your gate. Maisa de gancha, Maisa is Maisa of your grain. Tiroishcha is your wine. Yitzerecha is your olives. Ubechoiris bekarcha b'tzainecha. Bechoiris, right? Bekarcha b'tzainecha. Bechol nederecha, any neder that you made to bring as a carbon. Ashatida b'nvaisecha chumas yadcha. Okay, so we're going to need this pasuk, but let me go ahead and let me mute whoever's unmuted and making us noise. Okay, we got rid of him. Okay, now what Rabbi Shimon's going to do, fellas, we're going to see in his dialogue, we're going to see that he must hold about Bikurim bikurim that the kriya is ma'akiv. Now, the godless of this guy's pasuk is Rav Shimon is going to start darshaning from backwards forwards. Shumas Yotcha, guys, is going to be bikurim. So he's not going to darshan from Maisa. He's going to start darshaning from Shumas Yotcha, which is bikurim. Okay, he's going to start darshaning from this pasuk backwards. That's the whole. He goes backwards and backwards, and as a result of going backwards, he's able to extrapolate various halachas. Okay, who's the Tanya? Says the Gemara, Uchumas Yatcha, we just saw that. El Bikurim, that's Bikurim. Amrav Shimon, Ma Bozel Lamdenu. What is this coming to teach us? By saying you're not able to eat Bikurim in your gates. Im lo eichla chutz l'chaymer. If it's telling me that you can't eat it outside Yerushalayim, kal v'chaymer mimaisa. Now, we're going to see that right now we're holding Bikurim is more chamer than Maisa. Hakal, Uma Maisa Hakal. Maisa Sheni, which is more lenient than Bikurim. You can't eat it if you eat it outside Yerushalayim Leika. Bikurim like Kol Shekain. If you eat Bikurim outside Yerushalayim like Kol Shekain, that what? That you should get Malchus. So why do you have to say like Sucha Lecha B'Sharecha? I know that. From a Kal V'Chaymer, from Maisa, I would know Bikurim cannot be eaten outside. So Taich the Pasuk. You can't eat b'sharecha bikurim. I know you can't eat bikurim. I know it from a kal v'chaymer from Maisa. So what's the limit leisucha lecha b'sharecha come to teach me? This is all we need it for, and then the rest is going to be a digression. Is what? Right? That if you eat bikurim before you call the parsha of Ramin David Avi, Shulaika, you're going to what? Get Malchus. You're going to get Malchus. That's what, guys. So you got it? That's the Rav Shimon. So the Gemara is asking, why didn't Rabbi Yochanan say Rabbi Akiva Stimusa? He could have said Rabbi Shimon Stimusa because we have Rav Shimon learning in a brisa openly that it's not, if you eat it before Kriyas Hashem, you get Malchus. The Kohen is going to get Malchus. What was the teretz? To tell me that Rabbi Akiva gives Rav Shimon. Now, we're just going to continue to darshan the rest of the pasuk, even though we accomplished what we needed, which Rav Shimon says that you get Malchus. The Kohen will get Malchus if he's for Kriya, and we got that already. So, looking at the pasuk, guys, this pasuk is going to be, it's important. Leisucha lecha b'sharecha, trumas yadcha. You don't need to tell me trumas yadcha, you can't eat it outside b'sharecha, outside Yerushalayim. You know from Kavachayim Maisa. Madach Maisa Sheni, you can't eat outside Yerushalayim, and Truma, which is more Chomer, Einay Din, Bikurim, which is more Chomer, Einay Din. Why do you have to tell me you can't eat it? It means you can't eat it b'sharecha, you can't eat it before Kriyas Hashem. It's coming to teach me you can't eat it before you call the name. That's the way Rav Shimon dashes that aspect. Now we're going to continue, go ahead and dashing the rest of that pasuk. V'nid vaysecha, it says v'nid vaysecha, to toidu shlamim, you're nidava, you're being carbon shlamim, you're being in a toida for 4 reasons. Amar of Shimon, ma bazel lamden, what's it come to teach me? Im la'oichlin chutz la'chayma, as it seems to be saying you can't eat a toida or shlamim, and we're outside Yerushalayim, kavachayim mimaisa, right? What's which is mochama, maisa or toida shlamim? I would say toida shlamim, and just like maisa you can't eat outside, so too toida shlamim you can't eat outside. So why do you tell me lesucha lecha b'sharecha? Haleba kosavela loichel b'toida shlamim l'fnei zrika shulaika. One of the in the 4 avodas Adam, the zrika goes ahead and matters what? It matters the basal achila. If the kohen would eat it, but this is not after kohen, toida shlamim go to a yid also. If they're going to eat it before, you might get malchus. You might get malchus. Where do you know from? I don't need it to teach me the din of eating it literally. It must be teaching me what? If you eat from the shlamim or the toida before zrika, you'll get malchus. So again, we're darshaning this pasuk, right? We're darshaning this pasuk. So we darshan trumas yatcha. We darshan what? We darshan nidvaisecha. And now we're going to dash in b'chayros. We're going to dash in b'chayros right now. Why do you? It says you can't eat b'chayros b'sharecha. You know what? Obviously, we all go back to the Kavachayma from Maisa. Ubechayra is there Bechar. Amrav Shimon, Ma Bazel Lamednu, Imlech Lechos L'chayma Kavachayma Maisa. So in other words, we know, so far we know that Bikurim is Muhammad and Maisa, Shlamim Mutayd is Muhammad and Maisa, and Bukhar is Muhammad and Maisa. And just like Maisa, you can't outside Yerushalayim, so to all these things, you can't outside Yerushalayim. Says the Gemara, Kal B'chayim Maisa, Im Lefnei Zerika. Mazal, Im Leichen Chas L'chayim, Kal B'chayim Maisa. Im Lefnei Zerika, that you ate the Bukhar Lefnei Zerika, Kal B'chayim Mitayr Shlamim. In other words, so it must be Bukhar is more chomer. Guys, you know what we're saying? Bukhar is more chomer than what? Then we're saying Bukhar is more chomer than Taida Ushlamim. Because you're telling me, if that you can't eat this Rika, Kol Shekain, Bukhar you can't eat this Rika. Again, it's very important to know what the chomer is, and we'll see in a second. So, Halay Ba Kosavelo, Loichlam in Bukhar, Afil Lachas Rika. If you eat from Bukhar after this Rika, where? In Yerushalayim. So who's eating it? Who's eating it? A Zar. A Zar is eating a Bukhar in Yerushalayim, and he's getting Malkus. Why? Well, he's not a Kohen. Guys, you hear? A non-Kohen, it's very interesting. Once the Bukhar gets a mum, it's barbecue time. He can invite the whole Welt. If it's Bali mum, and you would eat it, in other words, if you would eat it after Zrika, and you're a non-Kohen, you would get Malkus. That's what it's teaching me. That's what it's teaching me. So let's go over so far what we have. I love keeping cheshbon before we don't get lost in the source. Okay, so the first one, Shtumas Yadcha, was speaking about Bikurim Fnei Kriya Shashem. The next one was Nidvasecha, that Shlomim and Taidel Fnei Zrika, and B'chayros is Afilu B'Yushalayim after Zrika. Afilu Yushalayim after Zrika, you would get Malkus in all of these. So far, you so good? Bobblehead time? Yeah. Okay, good. Bekorcha b'tzaynecha, going back, bekorcha b'tzaynecha, zuchatas v'yasham. What are you going to learn? Rav Shimon, ma bazel lamenu. Im la'ichlin chutz l'chayma, that if you eat him outside the chayma, kav l'chayma ma'isa. Im l'fnei zrika, kav l'chayma b'tay d'shlamim. Im la'achas zrika, kav l'chayma b'char. Right? Haloi bo ha'kosav, ela la'oichel michatas v'asham, afilu achas zrika, chutz l'kloyim, shulaika. If you eat from the chatzas asham after the zrika outside, you would get malchus. Okay, again, only a kohen can eat this. Chatzas v'asham. So it's lefnei zrika, it's achas zrika, chutz l'chayma, and you're getting malchus. So each one is built upon the other one. But notice, fellas, we're working our way backwards. Notice you're working your way backwards. You're working from Bechar to Zevach Shlomim to Bechar. Excuse me. You're working from Bikurim to Zevach Shlomim to Bechar to Chatas Vashim. Right? You're working your way backwards. Good. That's important. Now, Nidorecha Zuayla. Carbon a neder is an oila. Harizu, Hari Alai, usually Hari Alai. Amrav Shimon, Ma Bazal Lamednu, Im Lo Eichel Chutz L'chayma, Kavachayim Maisa. Im Lefnei Zrika, Kavachayim Mitay L'Shlamim. Im Lachas Zrika, Kavachayim B'char. Im Chutz L'klayim, Kavachayim B'chatzis L'Asham. Halay Boha Kosav Amid Beis, Ella Lecho Mina Oila Lachas Zrika, Afil B'fnim, Shulaika. You know why? Because you don't need an oila. Because the oil is totally burnt, you don't need it. So even a kohen inside, right? Look at Rashi. Loich loila. Afilu lachazrika. Va'afilu kohen shulaike. V'yasharas asay ashkin baba alma. Baruch b'nei arwain. Kol elhi v'loila chiletz for the purpose of burning it and not what? Eating it. Okay, so in other words, so the only thing we needed this limud for was the first limud. That bikurim is what? If you eat it before Kriyas Hashem, you get Malkus. Then we worked our way up to Machav from Maisa. We said Lefnei Zrika, Achas Zrika, Lokech. Okay, now Amarava, the Yaleda Ime Kerev Shimon Teled. If your mother gives birth, let her give birth to a child like Rev Shimon. If you lie, let's say if not, she shouldn't give birth at all. That's a little shverlich. Yeah, some people take this out. especially people who have a lot of kids. Anyway, the afagav, the islu pricha, even though there's a kasha on all these limudim, guys, what's the limudim predicated upon? That everything's Muhammad and Maisa, right? You started off everything. Ma Maisa, if you eat outside, you get Malchus. Bikurim, which is Muhammad, you get Malchus. Toidu, which is Muhammad, you get Toidu Shlamim is Muhammad. Chatzis Vashem is Muhammad. Everything Muhammad. 1 second. A kal v'choyma, a pricha koldu, even a little kasha, slugs up your kal v'choyma. Okay, so now, my chumrah, the bikurim in Maisa. What's the chumrah that bikurim has over Maisa? Shkin asurim l'zarim. Maisa can be eaten by zarim. Maisa sheni. Bikurim only a kayin. Adarabba. Maisa chama shkin asal oinen. What do you say? What do you say in Pasha of Bir Maisus? Lechalti ba'oini. I didn't eat a ba'oini. Mashen came bikurim, which is mutal oinen. In other words, there's a tzad chomer that bikurim Maisa has over bikurim. Mehechet tesa bikurim is more chama. Guys, so maybe you know what it's telling me? You can't eat bikurim b'sharecha because you can't learn from Maisa because Maisa is more chama. Your whole thing was predicated upon madach Maisa, which is more kal, can be eaten at b'sharecha. Certainly bikurim, which is more chama, can be eaten b'sharecha. Right? That was his limud. That was his limud. 1 second, maybe there's no such limud. Next, umay chumid the toidu shlamim mimaisa shekain tuunim matin domim v'imurim gam mizbeach. It's a carbon. It needs rad. It needs rikastam. It needs hakaras emurim. Adarabba maisa chama shekain tuunim kesef tsura. In order to be poida maisa sheni, guys, you need tzarta kesef biyatra. You need that the coin can't be a slug. It can't be an asimon. It has to have vada matbei. It has to have a tsura. So we have a tzad chomer that Maisa has over that. So your starting point of what Maisa hakal kol shekain shlamim metoida doesn't exist. Uma chomer de bechor metoidu shlamim. What would you said? Madach toidu shlamim lifnei zrika. Certainly that lifnei zrika, right? Shekain kedushasam irechem adarabba. Toidu shlamim chumur shekain tuunim smicha unisachim. Bechor does not need smicha, does not need sachim. So therefore, what? How do you know Bechor is Muhammad? Maybe Shlam is Muhammad. Utir v'chaz v'shoik, this week's parsha. Uma chumr dechatas v'yoshim Bechor, shekain kach shekadashim adarabba. Bechor chumr shekain kedashim irechem. Uma chumr de oil v'chatas v'yoshim shekain kolol, it's totally burnt. Adarabba. Chatas v'yoshim chamiri shekain mechaprim. And v'kula chamir me oil, this v'ushtei achilos. All these other things are eaten by 2 achilas. 1 achilas mizbeach, the imurim that go to Hashem, and sveitins, the food that goes to people. Mashenkin oila, which is all to Hashem. So, in other words, said Rava, if you have children, you should have children like Rav Shimon. But guess what? He slugged up this whole limud. So Gemara is going to ask, so he slugged up the old limud, why should you have kids like Rav Shimon? Right? Fred the Gemara, Elamayde yalde ime Rav Shimon. And for the Gemara, according to what he held, it was the Kal V'Chomer, Misaris Le'Krav V'Darish. As I pointed out to you, the whole limud of Shimon was based upon starting guys with the back, right? You started Maisas Mohammed and then Chum is Mohammed and then Bikurim. Zebach Ushlamim is Mohammed then Maisa. I mean, Maisa is Mohammed. Bikurim is Muhammad and Maisa. Zevach Shlom is Muhammad and Maisa. Right? Bechor is Muhammad and Maisa. Chatas v'yoshim is Muhammad and Maisa. Everything, the whole lima was predicated upon going backwards. If you would have started going that way, it wouldn't have worked. Let's see Rashi, guys. Delamai desvirale misavis lekrov v'darishlei. Lefi daitoi shehachomrim shehu moitzai ba'oisai shu moitza chamurim nerim loi chaymer. According to what he felt was the chumrah, what he felt, Saris is hanikra. He went ahead. Saris means he inverted. He inverted the pasuk l'darshay behepech, to go ahead and darshan in the opposite way. Limtzai surim, to find these surim that we wouldn't have had. Guys, we wouldn't have had all these surim. Look how many halachas. Guys, look how many halachas you're learning from this pasuk. How many halachas? Before it gets malchus. Oila, no matter when you get Malkus. Chatzos v'yosham, that he had Zrika, everything was great. Chutz the claim, you get Malkus. In other words, he extrapolating halachas. And they're all true. Shemotza, Shem Darshu Kisidroin, if he would have dashed him Kiseda starting from Maisa, he wouldn't have been able to learn them. For example, Shem Darsh Tchilu B'choiros, right? If let's say you go in order, you say Bechar, Za Bechar, V'chima Bolu Lamednu, Im Lo Eich L'chutz L'chayma, Kavachayim Maisa, Im Lo Eich L'fnei Zvika, Kavachayim Mitaydu Shlamim, Ein Ze Nachayim, Shadayin Le Matzu B'Taydu Shlamim. We never found the halacha of Taider Shlamim yet to go ahead and dash in that way. We only found the halacha of Shlamim because you inverted and went backwards. All you would know is eating from the Bechar Lefnei Zrika, not Lachas Zrika Shulaika. But you wouldn't know that if a non-Kayin eats it after Zrika, that he gets Makos. You wouldn't know that. There you go. You wouldn't have a warning to eat after Zrika. So says Rava, I have a pircha on everything Rav Shimon said. Why am I lauding Rav Shimon? You used to have a chalak of Shimon because he went ahead and darshan this pasuk based upon the chumrah that he felt was a good kal v'chaimer backwards, which you wouldn't have not able to done if you would have gone forwards. You wouldn't have known Bechor if the only way you knew Bechor is that it's speaking la'achas rika, because you didn't need the din of Lefnei Zrika. Why didn't you need the din of Lefnei Zrika? Because you darshan the pasuk that came after Bechor, which is what? Which is Taidu Shlamim. But 1 second, in the order the pasuk Bechor comes before Taidu Shlamim. It's only because he darshan backwards Taidu Shlamim, he knew Bechor that way. Geshmak is anything. Very geshmak. Back in the Gemara. Now, this whole Gemara, guys, was based upon a Kal V'chomer. How could you learn an Issa from a Kal V'chomer? Not an Oynish, a warning. A warning. Why did you say Madach Maisa da Bikurim da Madach Maisa da Taidu Shlamim da Chatas Hashem da? You know, it's all based upon a Kal V'chaimer. It's very the Gemara Kasha, right? B'chim was Harim Masirim Min Adin. Can you go ahead and learn that as Hara from a Kal V'chaimer? Ha'afilu man da'ama Oinshim Min Adin. That's Rabbi Yitzchak that we mentioned earlier. That you learn Oinshim Min Adin. And for the Gemara Yisur we're not learning what? We're not learning Malkis, we're just learning Isurim. We're not learning Malkis, we're learning Isurim just in Issa. Says Rashi. Isura ba'alma, haid the kamaisi bekulu azhara b'kal v'chaymer, that we're learning all of them from b'kal v'chaymer, Isur ba'alma komar v'loy l'malkus. We're only learning Isur ba'alma and not b'malkus. Only Isur ba'alma and not b'malkus. Back in the Gemara, right? V'amar ay v'amar Rabba zor shoychel min ha'oila l'fnei zvika chutz l'chayma l'Rav Shimon Leika chamesh. You get, so you think it's speaking about l'inyan malkus. Says the Gemara chamish isurim habe. It's 5 isurim. Okay, so a zor that eats from an oila before zvika outside the chayma. According to Rav Shimon, you're going to get 5 malchus, so you see it's from malchus. It says Gemara Chamishi Yisurim. It's 5 Yisurim. So we answered it up. We answered that up. Okay, let's see Rashi over here. Where do you get 5? Zar, what is he doing? It's a zar. It's a non-kayin. Sha'oichel min ha'oila. He's eating from an oila. That's not good. L'fnei zerika. That's certainly not good. Chutz l'chayim. That's certainly not good. Dafka kayin. Dafka zar kama. Dafka zar would get 5. V'afagav the kayin l'gabe oila zar who. Even though a kohen legabe an oila is a zar, hacha zar dafka kama. Here it means a non-kohen. The kohen, because if it's a kohen, batzlu chad laf, you'd be missing 1. The chamish the kamar chad mishum chutz lechayma. The asi b'kal v'chayma mimaisa. The chad mishum lefnei zrika. The asi b'kal v'chayma mitoida v'shlamim. The chad mishum zar gomor. Even I feel achas zrika by bechor, guys, by bechor. Therefore, the asi b'kal v'chayma bechor. Good. So if you learned Kal V'chayim and Bechar, who's getting Malchus for Bechar after Zrika? Only a Zar. And Mele, you have to be speaking about a Zar and not a Kayin. The Kolshkin Lefnei Zrika. V'chad mishum oichel chutz l'kloyim. The Yosef b'Kal V'chayim michatas v'yashtam. V'chad mishum oichel oila v'afilu Kayin. V'toicha kloyim. The Kolshkin Zar chutz l'kloyim. Okay, that's your 5. Chutz l'kloyim alma loika chamesh, you get 5. Okay, so therefore, it's speaking about the, and Teretz it's speaking about the Surim. It's not speaking about what? It's not speaking about Malchus.